Let's see. I know that you want to do the quiz. We will, I promise. Before that, I want to review your assignment 1. I want to talk about your assignment. To be clear, I asked you to do requirements. My goal with the assignment 1 was to measure your knowledge. And I think you already have grades. Basically, you receive grades because you submit. So if you were responsible and you submit your work, probably you receive a good grade, almost for sure 100 over 100. Just because you submit your homework. Receiving 100 over 100 doesn't mean that your requirements are correct. That is something that I am going to review with you today. That is something that I want to talk with you about it. So just remember this the day of your exam. If in your exam I ask you, or in the next quiz I ask you for a requirement of the Pac-Man video game, probably if you just copy paste something that you put in your assignment 1 could not be correct. And I want you to be aware of that. So your grading the assignment is because of you submit something that makes sense, but whether or not it's correct is something that I want to review with you. Yes. So let me put the big picture. And this is something that I assume you know, but something that I want to do the first weeks is to be sure that you really know what I expect you to know. So number 1, in 360, you learn what is a requirement. Something that I talk about in the previous lecture quickly. You know that requirement is not the same that necessity. You know that as a customer, if I ask you for something, that something is not immediately a requirement. Moreover, we talked in the previous lecture about these invest principles, things that you review in order to be sure that a particular statement is a requirement. Moreover, something that you know from 360 is you have 2 types of requirements, functional and non-functional. And I asked you in your homework to give me examples of functional requirements and non-functional requirements. And I want to review those examples with you, some of them, just to be sure that we understand the difference between one and the others. Moreover, something that I want to talk about it is, you know that when you define a requirement, that functionality of the software, well, your requirements usually are a collection of tasks that you should do in order to accomplish the requirement. Moreover, those tasks are a collection of steps that you need to follow in order to complete the task. This connection here is something that I need you to have on mind when you are working. There are things that are very, very specific, that are one step to accomplish something. And that step is one small part of a requirement. For sure, it should be there. But it's not a requirement itself. And we need to be able to identify what is a step, what is a requirement. Moreover, what is a step, what is a task, what is a requirement. A requirement, a collection of tasks. A task, a collection of steps. Very, very important. I am assuming that you remember from 360 that you review diagrams. One of the first diagrams that you check, use case diagrams. Use case diagrams was this tool that you use to represent requirements. I am going to talk more about them, but just for you to have the picture, I am talking about those diagrams in which you have this guy connected with others. Do you remember this, right? Here, which are the requirements? Well, the requirements are these others, right? If you have two requirements, you have this diagram, and the diagram have these two ovals, and inside of the ovals, you put the name of the requirement. But also you have other diagrams that you review. State, activity. Help me. Activity diagram. What was the goal of the activity diagram? When you use activity diagrams, or for what you use activity diagrams? Do you remember? The activity diagrams help you to represent the sequence of something, yes, and conditions, and loops, and things that happen concurrently. Tell me, it is true that if this A is a requirement, if I need to explain details about this A, whatever it is, what I can do is to use an activity diagram. Do you remember that activity diagrams basically provide details for the ovals? You have the requirements, the ovals. If you need to provide details about what is happening in this oval, about what is the meaning of this requirement, you have other diagrams that help you to do that. For instance, the activity one. Another one, the state. And I am not going to give you the full list. My point here is, if you remember these diagrams, the requirement, your requirements is each of the ovals in the use case diagrams. Each oval, one requirement. And I am talking right now that requirements are a collection of tasks. If you have a task, this task, the details, is what you put in the activity diagram. Moreover, inside of the activity diagram, you have these diamonds and rectangles and bars. Each of these elements inside of the activity diagram are what I am calling steps. Did you notice? Your diagram with your requirements, all of them, each circle is a requirement. If you need to provide details, you put the details in another diagram, the activity one, and that diagram is basically a collection of the different steps that you need to follow in order to accomplish that task. That is something that you reviewed before. The requirement, the details. What I asked you to do for the Pac-Man was this. I asked you for the requirements. I asked you for the things in the ovals, period. Whatever you mention as a requirement, whatever you put in a line in your homework, you are telling me that that sentence is one sentence that you can put inside of one of these ovals and connect with another ovals or with an actor, depending on what is happening. And I need to talk more about the different kind of connections, extension, inclusion, but that is a different story. The ovals, those are the requirements. Details in a different place. I am showing the diagrams, but if we go with the Agile methodology, maybe you do not want to do diagrams. The text, the explanation, one way or another, represent the same information. Make sense? Silence. Hopefully, yes. Going back to your homework, I asked you to do requirements for a particular project. Something that you agree with me, whatever is the project here, is not the requirement. The requirement is the thing that you create. What I want is the Pac-Man video game. That is what I mentioned. I want the Pac-Man video game, give me the requirements for that. So your work here, think about in the Pac-Man video game, what is a requirement, what is not a requirement, what is maybe a task or a step or something else. Okay. Right now, I am not talking about Agile or not. We are going to talk about that later. But I have a problem, the Pacman, and I am asking you to document requirements. Whether you do a diagram or user stories for the agile, I don't care. The important thing is these requirements are the first step to start working in the programming. Why? Because these requirements are the things that I am going to use to define my task, my steps. And to be clear, those tasks are going to become methods or classes in some point. That is the goal. A collection of classes or a collection of methods are going to solve one requirement, one functionality. These functionalities are the starting point for everything. So it is very important to have those clear and well done. And that is the goal of analysis, understanding the problem. So let's review if you understand or if you document a good understanding of the Pac-Man video game, and you can help me to evaluate your classmates. So remember, something is good if follow the best principles. Every requirement that I will show you and I will ask you if that is correct or not, you remember, you read the sentence and you're going to check this thing. Is Lowe's couplet with others? Is independent? Yes or no? This thing here is explaining what and not how. Keyword for that is negotiable. And really what I need you to remember is the requirements are about what the system is going to do, not how it's going to be implemented. Negotiable. It has value. Value. Always value for the customer. Sorry, for the requirement, we don't care about the developers. This is important for the customer, yes or no? Can I calculate how many times I am going to need to implement this? This is for you. You are developers, you have experience programming. Can you read that sentence and figure out what do you need to do in order to program that? Let me be clear. It is not important that you guess correctly if you're going to need hours or days. The point is, if you can figure out the cost for that requirement, the cost, the time that you need to complete, that means that you understand what you need to do. That means that you can have in your mind quickly, I'm going to need to do functions, variables, methods, whatever. This is measuring your understanding of the requirement. This is somehow measuring if the requirement is clear or not for you. If it's clear, you can do an estimation. If it's not easy to do the estimation, maybe it's because you do not understand what you're going to do. That is the key idea. Small, we talked about this before, and testing. I can define a way to test that this is done, yes or no. Those principles, I ask you to check this in every single line that you submit in your assignment. So let's review what happened. Pac-Man. You understand the Pac-Man. Go to check your submissions. I am going to review scenarios, maybe yours, maybe not, but you can help me to check. Disclaimer. As I mentioned before, your grade in the homework, you can have 100. That 100 doesn't mean that what you submit is correct. It means that you submit something on time, you are good. The review is what I am going to present right now. So I am not going to review all your homeworks. You are 100 people. It's going to be your homework to review what you submit, to review your version of the requirements, and check if maybe, just maybe, you make any of the mistakes that I am going to describe. So I am going to share with you common mistakes. Please review with your team your submission. And if you made any mistake, what could be the solution? If you have a particular question, please let me know, or the TA, send us a message if you want a meeting to review your particular submission. But the goal is you check that whatever you submit have errors or not after my presentation today. So with that in mind, examples, let's see. Scenario number 1. Yeah, there is going to be another assignment, and the other assignment, the grading criteria is going to be different, not use the submission. Again, for today, I am not grading that you did this correct or not, because in order to do this correct, you need to have 360 knowledge. And I do not want to assume if you have that knowledge or not. My goal for today was to measure the knowledge of the class, the 100 people here, and know what I need to review. And that is exactly what I am going to do. So, good. For the next assignments, I can assume that you have the knowledge because we're going to spend a couple of lectures reviewing that you have that knowledge. So, yeah, in the future, your grades are not going to be used 100 for submission. Good. Okay. Help me. Scenario number one. One of the submissions that I have is what you have on the screen. One team told me, you know what? Requirements 1 to 25 are functionals, and the others are non-functionals. So I make a copy paste, and according with this, 26 to 36 are non-functional requirements. Yes or no? To be more specific, any of these lines, for instance, a song is going to be played when blah, blah, blah. This line here, that one, question in your exam, 28 is functional or non-functional? 28, functional. Thank you, guys. So let me be clear. This 28 is functional. Really? I do not know if that is a typo in the document, but I want to be sure that we agree what is a functional requirement, what is a non-functional requirement. 360. Non-functional requirements are two things, constraints or quality. Two things, constraints and quality. Everything that the software do, every action or functionality or service, whatever the software do, is connected with functional requirements. If you mention play a song, who is going to play the song? The software. And if the software is going to play the song, that is a functionality. And if that is a functionality, this is a functional requirement. It's something that the customer wants. Yes. An animation play. Yeah, that is my point. Let me go one by one for the people in the chat. 26, functional or non-functional? Functional, agree. A functionality, you want an animation. 27 is the same to 28, functionals. 29 is another song, functional. 30, I need to talk more about this, but it's talking about some kind of event that is going to happen in the software, winning, losing, etc. Functionality. 31, something about saving information. Saving information. The software is the one that is going to save the information, the scores. Functionality. 32, the names. Functionality. 33, levels. Functionality. 34, sounds. Functionality. 35, I need to talk more about this, but creating a menu on the screen is something that is going to happen there. This is not exactly a requirement. This is more like a step in one of the requirements. But if you give me the option A or B, functional or non-functional, this is a step in a functional requirement. It is not something non-functional. It is not quality or constraint. So it should not be here as a non-functional. Similar idea with the last one. if you want some start menu or start the game, you're talking about something that happened in the software. All of this, red rectangle, they are functional or connected with functional. I need to be more specific with that, but these are not non-functional requirements. Non-functional only, constraints and quality. If we talk about quality, fast, slow, memory, etc., quality, those are non-functional. If we talk about constraints, use Java to develop this. That is a constraint. I am asking you to use a particular language, a particular library, whatever. Constraints, those are non-functional. Anything that the software is not doing, like if I ask you to use Java is not something that the software is going to do. It's not a service, a functionality, or an action in the software. Those are non-functional. But all this, play a song, play an animation, store information, all of that, functional.
May I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please go.
So what about resolution of images? Because resolution of images feels like a constraint to me, but I know that you can affect the resolution of the image in how you code. So which is it?
That is a quality. The resolution of the images, the quality of the frame rate, etc., is about quality. Those qualities, non-functional. Now, let me be clear. When we talk about something being non-functional, that doesn't mean that you do not need to do something in the code, in the programming, to achieve that requirement. The fact that this non-functional means that it's not one service or one thing that is going to be happening in the software in one particular point. The non-functional requirements are something that cover the full project. Like if we talk about this being done in Java, it's like the full project is going to be in Java, not only one specific functionality. Or if we talk about this should be fast, okay, it should be fast, everything in the software, all the classes, methods, and so on, not only this particular thing here. And when we talk about resolution, frame rate, quality of the images or whatever, is something that is going to affect all the places in which something graphic is happening. So it's not a particular functionality that the software provides. It's the quality, the adjectives about how that functionality is going to happen. Okay, this is going to be the functionality, and this functionality should happen fast, or should happen with this particular frame rate, or should happen with this particular qualities. So if I ask you for a particular frame rate, or if I ask you for a particular quality in the images, yeah, that means that you need to work more with Photoshop, or that means that you need to use this particular library because this particular library is better than the previous one, or that you need to use this particular instruction because that particular instruction is going to achieve something, or you need to work with threads because working with threads is going to allow you. That is the implementation. But the requirement, quality, non-functional. Functionality, any functionality, a functional requirement. Makes sense. So the first thing that you need to ask yourself is, this is about something that the software is going to do, or is a constraint, or is something that is quality that need to be achieved?
Thank you. Would it be accurate to say that functional is what you do and non-functional is how you do it?
Well, functional is what the software do. What the software do, functional, yes. And non-functional, yeah. Not exactly how, because the how is the programming, the implementation, but again, the quality of the functionality or the constraints to achieve the functionality.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Feedback for this first scenario makes sense. Good. Question in your next quiz or exam. I give you one of these lines, my question, functional or not functional, you just select the one that apply. I shared with you previous videos, 360. There are more examples there, but please be sure that you understand the difference, functional, non-functional. And check in your assignment one if maybe you submit as a functional something that is non-functional or the opposite. Good. Second scenario. What do you think about this? I do not put boxes at all. idea. Running on a specific platform, like what? Non-functional. It's similar to the idea of using Java or make it this to be portable or not. All that non-functional, because it's not something that the software is going to do. Yeah, the software is the one that you're going to run, but in which place? Well, the place that you put the developing. All of that, well, the one in the chat, running in Windows and so on, non-functional. Good. Now, moving here. Moving here, looks like good idea of non-functional, right? I mean, a first scan of the text is like, they looks good. Moreover, they put the specifics. Performance is a quality, usability is a quality, maintainability is a quality, 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 quality. So all of them seems to be non-functional requirements, and all of them seems to be related with qualities. Just reading the first word. So far, so good. But number one, what do you think about that lines? The specifics of the number one. Pac-Man, blah, blah, blah. That one follow the invest principles? Yes, no. If not, what can we do? So far, so good. The most important thing here, and I want to highlight this, you're talking about performance. You're talking about this should be fast. Well, in a different words. The important thing is you are providing a measure. You are making this to be able to be tested. The important part here with this line, the reason because I put the check is you have the numbers. And those numbers make this clear for everyone. Because without the number, it's like, what do you mean about a small delay or no delay? The numbers are important. Check. You mentioned in the chat, make this small. I agree with that. I mean, it's not an issue at all. But if you notice, this idea, and this idea, 3 times is kind of similar thing. Should be fast, should be fast, should be fast. Fast with numbers, fast, little or not delay, fast with, should not happen this we're playing. 3 times similar idea, maybe, and this is just a maybe, these 3 ideas can be summarized in 1 or 2. Maybe you can make this small, but even in the way that it is, check, invest, can be tested. It is clear, maybe redundant, but it's clear the idea of the quality that you are asking for. And yeah, it's non-functional. Good. What about the next one? I agree with that one. Why? Why this number 2 should not be listed as a requirement, should not be here? This is the opposite to the previous one. It's like subjective, cannot be measured. think about this. You are taking the responsibility as a software engineers to testify that your software can be used by people 3 or plus. It is not your responsibility. This definition of this software is for this particular group of people, this particular population, this particular age, is not your work. Be careful with that. It's not something that you can test. It's something that you do not want to test. What can you do to be sure that this age 3 or plus? This is something that you need to ask to the customer. I do not care about the rules that you need to follow because I do not care about what you are going to do with this software, but explain to me what I need to do in order to accomplish this request. Maybe particular colors, maybe particular size for things, maybe whatever particularities the customer can share with you, those could be requirements. But this idea of the age 3 or plus is too open. You do not want to deal with this because you cannot verify this. Not like that. You can verify that the colors are correct. You can verify that the size of the fonts are correct. You can verify that, I don't know, something, but not this. So no. Figure out the movements. Tell me, what do you want me to do for the movements? Use the arrows? Okay, the only thing that I can guarantee to you as a requirement is the Pac-Man is going to be able to move with the arrows. Whether or not that is easy, whether or not a child can figure out that is outside of my responsibilities. No. What about the tree? It's a requirement, yes or no? The code needs to be documented. And hopefully you're thinking right now like, well, requirements should have value for the customer. Talking about documentation is a value, something that has value for the customer, is something that the customer is going to be worried about it. Exactly. Good. Guys, anything related with the source code, anything, documentation included. That is something that you want as a developer. That is something that maybe your manager wants. That is something that maybe the company wants. The customer do not care. Only exception, parentheses, if your company is developing a framework and therefore the goal for the customer is to use that framework to develop something else, and therefore you need to submit the API documentation. That is a different story. But talking about the game, if I am your customer and I want the Pac-Man video game, or in general, when you're developing a product, not an API, if you're developing the product, no one cares about the documentation. Documentation or following the guidelines of Java or all those stuff is for you, for your team, do not have value for the customer, is something that you do not put as a requirement, neither functional or non-functional. No requirements at all. It's something that the professor wants, your manager or whatever, not a requirement. Yeah, it's easy. Big parenthesis, it's important. Moreover, later, if we talk about Agile, we're going to talk about this sprint backlog, and we're going to talk about what you put in the backlog. And in the backlog, you are going to put requirements, obviously, because you're going to work on requirements, but we're going to put other things, including learning things and including following standards and so on. It's important. It's going to be there in the process. The team need to know about it. My only point is there are going to be another place to put that. Is not a requirement for the software. Customers. Think about this, stakeholders. You are working in a project and what you put as a requirement, either functional or not functional, is something that is important for all the stakeholders. The stakeholders, your customer, the one that is going to pay for the software, also the users, the ones that are going to play with the software, and so on. If it's important for all the stakeholders, one way or another, could be a requirement. If it's important only for one or two, like for the developers or for the company, but the user, the customers, and others don't care, probably that is not a requirement. It's just something inside of the company. Yeah. So guys, as a summary, anything related with the code, good design, documentation, etc., they are not requirements. Requirements in the context that we are talking here is not something that requirement engineering is going to consider. Neither functional nor non-functional. Those are in another place. So, nope. What about this one? Requirement, yes or no? Functional or non-functional? Okay, it could be non-functional, but I agree with the chat. Again, what is the problem with this guy? What is the reason? Because we consider this something like, two ideas, exactly. Number one, this properly is like, what do you mean by properly? It's a question that you have in the chat. If that means something in terms of time, I mean, it should load in 1 second. If that means something in terms of it should run in a computer with only 1 kilobyte of memory free, I mean, if you can go in detail with those kind of specifics, okay, that could become a non-functional requirement. But if basically what you're telling there is the program should run, that is not a requirement. Let me be clear. The program should compile and the program should run. Those are things that are expected, but not considered requirements from the customer, right? I mean, the customer make obvious that if you are going to submit, deliver, deploy the product, that product is going to compile and run. There is no need for put that as a requirement. If that is the case, delete. If this is about time or about memory or about quality, be more specific. That is my recommendation for the 4. Five, scalability, extensibility. It's a quality for the product, a quality that the customer is interested in or not. Exactly. Now you have the idea. 6, something that I need you to be aware of. Be very, very careful when you use the not. What you want to document is what the customer wants. When there is a not, be careful. I am not telling you do not use the not. That is not my point. My point is be careful because that could be something risky. For instance, in this sentence number 6, should I put that as a requirement? The 6. should I tell, by the way, I want the Pacman, and by the way, as a requirement, could you make sure that this is not going to damage my other applications in my phone or the other applications in the phone of the users? Did you put that there? Yes or no? Thank you. No. But I am really concerned about the phone of my users. Well, if the software is well done, no software is going to do this. Well, unless you're doing a virus or something like that, but this is a game, right? The user is asking for a Pac-Man video game, and there is no reason because the Pac-Man video game should cause any damage to the phone or other things. You do not need to put that in the requirements. Obviously, that is something that you should be careful about it. If you're doing the Pac-Man video game in C, C++, and you're going to use pointers, obviously, we have the expectation that your pointers do not mix with the memory of other applications, do not create some kind of damage. But that is kind of quotation mark obvious. And if not, it's a requirement from the project manager or whatever to every people involved working. But this is not a requirement that you put in the project, because think about it, this requirement should be there in every single project of software. It's not the goal. The last one. It's a good requirement. I mean, security. The only thing that I want to mention here is if your project involves handling information from the user, if you are doing some kind of, application, and your application need to have access to the contacts of the user, if your application is having contact with the GPA's location of the user, if your application by default use the data, well, maybe this makes sense, the number 7. But remember, we're talking about the Pac-Man video game. Yeah. If we think about what the customer asked me to do, the Pac-Man video game, I never asked for personal information. Well, 2 things. Number 1, option 1, I never asked for personal information. Option 2, and this is a requirement that some of you listed, ask the user for the name when that user have the highest score. And in that moment, you need to be careful about this. If you are not asking the user for the name ever, for the highest score, you can delete this number 7, because really your program is not handling data. So you do not need to tell me that you are not going to do something that I didn't ask you to do. Now, if you're asking the user for the name, for the high score, well, you need to work and tell me, you are never asking for personal information, or you are asking the user for the name for the high score. And maybe you can put just a note in the requirement in which you ask for the name for the high score and ask for use the initials. That is something that could happen, or use write something, whatever, should not be your name. I don't care about what is your real name. For the Pac-Man, this number 7 probably do not need to be there. My point, guys, do not add requirements, do not add work that the customer do not want. Do not make this document to be huge. Just adding things that maybe do not match to the project that you are doing. Well, that's a different story, right? The virus. Okay, scenario number 2. Moving to different things. Scenario number 3. What do you think about this scenario? In particular, take a look to the red rectangles. Red rectangle, problem. What is the problem in my red rectangles? Yeah. Do you remember this? What? versus how. This is an example in which you're talking about the how. This is examples of things that are not negotiable. And not negotiable because you're talking with your customer and really a requirement is to create a class, a particular class. Do not talk about classes, functions, methods. Tell me what do you need. You do not need to tell me if that is a class, a function, or a method. That could be your mindset when you're talking with the customer. Customer, what do you need? You need a Pac-Man? You need a Pac-Man moving? Okay, you need the ghost moving. Okay, a maze, audio, sounds, animations. Okay, all of that, I document that you need that. I am not going to put here, you do not need to tell me if this is going to be a class Pac-Man, a class ghost, or a class maze. That are decisions that the team of developers are going to take. Because again, if you're going to work, you're going to receive a requirement, it's your responsibility to implement the requirement. No one is going to tell you, checklist of a programming assignment. Do this class, put this method, complete this exception. That is not going to happen. You solve the problem. You solve your task. Do not put this or this or this or this in your requirements. Those are bad requirements, negotiation. So check yours. This is the same that moving the Pac-Man, using the arrows, good. This one, your real requirement is moving the ghost. There is no need for implement an algorithm. It's obvious. You're going to implement an algorithm for everything. You do not need to put that there. What do you want? Moving the ghost. Okay. What do you want? Moving the Pac-Man. Okay. Using the keyboard? Using the keyboard. That should be your thinking in your requirements. So what versus how? Be careful with this kind of lines. Scenario number 4. What do you think about this? In particular, what do you think about 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? Do I have 5 requirements there? Good. You can think like, okay, these 5 have a problem because they are not independent. You can think these 5 should be 1. I mean, these 5 are really one requirement. And you can use the names that you want, but basically what you're asking there is the Pac-Man should be able to move with the keyboard. And you can give me the details. Okay, the Pac-Man is going to move with the keyboard up, down, left, right. It's one requirement. And probably these 6 things are the task or the steps inside of the requirement. These are the specifics of one requirement, one thing. Think about in terms of programmers. If you are going to ask someone to do this, you can ask the same programmer, only one person. And you can ask, hey, you're going to do this program, and you're going to have this circle in yellow, and your responsibility is to be able to control the movement of that circle with the arrows. Yeah, up, down, left, right. One person, one functionality. Move this circle in yellow with the arrow keys. That means, obviously, this. These are details. These are redundant. These are steps. All these 2 to 6 should be one requirement. That's my point. What do you think about 17? Independent. Remember, each line should be independent from the other lines. Here, if you tell me, do something, add something to a previous functionality, that is if I need to add something here, these two are not independent. These two are kind of mixed. The big problem is what previous functionality? The 16 or something else? It could be an include, worst case scenario. But when you write the line, be sure to put the full description. Be more specific. If you really do not want to write the text to the previous functionality requirement 5 or requirement 3, I mean, at least a comment about which is the previous one that you are referring to. Even though it's 16, just to be sure for the reader that is concerned about which one, put a reference or put the text, whatever you want. Be specific. At the end, the goal is each of these lines, I am going to give that one to one developer. Later, we care about the integration, but one developer per line. Another one, 5. What do you think about this 34, 36? Okay, now you are making the point. Now you get the experience. Number 1, let's check 34. 34 is asking for a sound that should be played in a particular scenario. You agree with me? 34 is a requirement. It's something that you want. It's going to be a nodal. It's going to be connected with another action, but we need to talk about the connection later. But play a sound. Play a sound when something happens. Something that I'm going to show you later, and the only reason because I mentioned this one, you need to think about, you want to tell the people, play a sound when you eat, or you want to say the requirement is eat, and when you eat, something should happen with the score, and something should happen with the sound, etc. Both options are there. Finally, you're writing, but you need to think about, this is about mentioning the sound and explaining when, or could be better to explain the task, and that task is going to have several steps. The task, the real requirement that I want to point out here is eat. That is the real functionality. We want to allow this Pac-Man to eat. Which are the consequences? The sound, the score, animation, other things. Read your requirements and check if maybe the subject, the consequence, if maybe they are not in the opposite place. But again, I am not telling you that this is wrong. I am telling you, think about an improvement. Think about a different way to put things. A way that is going to help you to make the connections later. But so far, 34. 35. To split which one? I have a question. Split the requirement, split one. Which one? In general, yes. Remember, you need to be able to identify what is the requirement, the total thing, and which are the parts. The only thing that I ask you to do here is for the requirement. I haven't asked you yet about the details. We are moving forward to that. so far, the requirement. For instance, I asked you for the requirement of moving the Pac-Man, and I know that the details are the arrows or maybe the mouse or whatever. We haven't talked about that, but we agreed that the requirement is moving. The requirement is drawing, and so on. Even for the ghost, we agreed that the requirement is the ghost should move. We haven't talked about the details about how they are going to move. Details, steps, requirements, the global ideas. Well, you're going to put a name to your requirement. The name could be whatever you want, and then you explain what that name is representing. Obviously, the goal is more clear the title, more clear the sentence, the better. But yes, your requirement is a title, your requirement is an idea, and in the back of that idea, you have details. You provide details. Making the Pac-Man eat, at least that sentence could be problematic, because what does it mean make the Pac-Man eat? It like, are you talking about moving the Pac-Man? That was a different requirement. Are you talking about checking collisions of the Pac-Man with the ghost? It's about eating the ghost, or is just about this eating the pellets that are in the path? That could be my only point with that particular requirement, the clarity of eating what or under what conditions. There is going to be an explanation in the back, but again, clear the title, the better. Yep. Reading the chat, the sound is going to be a step in eating, maybe a step in moving, and a step in collision, the collision between the ghost and the Pac-Man. One step, when you detect the collision, is going to be play the sound. Yep. Yep. Here, to be sure with this diagram, this is a requirement, and whether or not these are other requirements or steps is something that we need to review. The difference is going to be, these are going to be circles in a use case diagram, or these are going to be activity diagrams related with this circle. If you want to think about diagrams, it's like, do I need a diagram to explain this? There is a task or a step, or is really something that is a requirement that I need to put as a use case. It should be a circle. We're going to do it, don't worry. But here, draw the menu. That one is a good requirement. I do not have anything here. I mean, it's a requirement, drawing what? A menu, whatever. The specific of the menu can be in the back. My only point is, I am not sure if we need a menu for the Pac-Man. I am not sure if a menu is involved there, but if it is a menu involved, the requirement is fine. In the picture that I show you, I think we do not have it. So that is the only reason, because I put this in red. But it's a requirement, it's functional. Whether or not it's included in the product that you are doing is a different story. Scenario 5, 6. $15, requirement, task, or step. How do you know that this is a step?
Because it's just part of moving the Pac-Man, or sorry, moving the ghosts, like yes. The rules of moving the ghosts. It's one particular part of that.
Yes, I agree with that. And hopefully everyone agrees. It's like, we're talking in the 15 about moving the ghost. And we want to define the specific about what does it mean to moving the ghost. And the specific of moving the ghost is, well, the ghost is going to stand in this XY position, the XY position of this box at the center, whatever. and they are going to be moving there for a particular period of time. And after another period of time, they are going to go out. And when they go out, then each of the different colors of ghost is going to move in different ways. We need to provide that specific, that definition, the global idea, the requirement, moving the ghost. That is the requirement. Think about this. You are a developer and you have all these requirements in the blackboard, and you're going to go in the morning, starting your day. And what you're going to do, quotation mark, is take one of these requirements, like a post-it, and whatever is there is your work for the next week or 2 weeks, whatever. So you're going to read there, my work is going to be moving the ghost, and you're going to turn that piece of paper. And in the back, you're going to have the specifics. The specifics. Maybe an activity diagram showing you all the conditions and the different things that mean moving the ghost. And you have 1 week or 2 weeks to write the instructions for that to happen. All the conditions, recursion, algorithm, whatever. It's your work. Your work, your requirement is moving the ghost. And this is just one instruction that you're going to put there. It's not a requirement. It's part of a requirement that have a name. I am naming that moving the ghost. You can use a different name. You can use a sentence bigger. But this is a step. Cannot be alone as a requirement. Because if you read this 15 and you think this is a requirement, it's like a little bit out of context. Delay the ghost. I need to work with the guy that is doing the movement. No independence. We need to work together because this line is going to be inside of the source code of that guy. A step. 16. Is a requirement? If so, functional or non-functional? Good. Agree with you guys. It's a requirement. It is short, clear, can be tested, independent, and so on. So all the invests can apply. The only thing is this one is non-functional. I do not know if this particular scenario, people put everything together, but just to be sure, this 16 is a non-functional requirement. Again, it's talking about multiple device functionality, just like running in multiple platforms. It's talking about the quality or the constraints, not about something that the software should do. What the software is going to do is move the yellow circle. What are you going to use as a device to tell the computer the movement that you want to do? Different story. Non-functional, 16. Good. Scenario number 7. What do you think? Good idea is you're getting the point. 13. Could you agree with me that one, this is a step. This is a step in the requirement moving the ghost, assuming that the ghost is the bad guy. Which is going to be the movement? Determining the movement is a step inside of that requirement. Okay, maybe this is the requirement. If this is the requirement, the only thing is be careful because it is not random, not in the game. So this is moving the ghost. How to calculate the next coordinates? There is an algorithm involved. It's not random. Be careful with this one. Could be ambiguous. Could be wrong because the ghosts do not move randomly. 14. 13 and 14 are steps of the same requirement. The requirement is still moving the ghost. Steps inside is randomly, or maybe they move randomly. A step inside is, well, define a direction. It's not only about the next X and Y coordinate, but some kind of path that you are going to follow later. Details of how the ghosts move. 2 steps, 1 requirement. These two cannot be separated. These two are one. Speed. Okay, these 3 are one. The speed, the direction, the algorithm to calculate the next one. Moving the ghost. 1 requirement, 3 steps. Well, speed up in the level. Moving the ghost, depending on the level that we are, state. And here, hopefully you remember your state diagrams. We have a state, the level. And according with that, we start with a particular speed, and that speed is going to increase and other things. None of them are random. I mean, there are 4 ghosts. I need to talk about it, but they have a particular algorithm there. So this random here is something that should not be, if we consider the game, the original one. Yeah. So something similar, I have in the chat the rule for Clyde, but I am going to share in the next slide, well, in the next lecture slides, similar definition for all of them. All of them have some kind of algorithmic definition of how they need to move. And you can represent that algorithmic definition with a diagram, an activity diagram, for instance. But it's coming. Now, yeah, okay. 18. Could you agree that this is part of the same moving department? Moreover, can you agree that it's not really rotate? I mean, the requirement is left, right, up, down, and this animation of this idea of rotation is something that just happened, but is left, right. It just changed the movement. If you're talking about the animation, if you're talking about the specific, is another step, a step in moving the Pac-Man. What about the last one? It is a requirement as alone, 22. Could you say that is something that I can take and I am going to be responsible of doing? That's a requirement, right? Exactly. If you read a line and I am not sure what I am going to do here, basically that means I need to fix that requirement or something is wrong there. And that is the reason because I asked you to work in a team. Because, well, if I am writing my own requirements, obviously I understand. But if I have 2, 3, 4 people with me, well, I can ask in the same way that I am asking right now, like, read this and tell me if you understand what to do. And if I have one that tell me I'm not sure, then probably something needs to be done. In this case, 22, I think something needs to be done. Probably it's a step in another requirement. Probably it's a requirement itself, but more information is needed. Something there is like, I am not sure what are you talking about. Well, I know the game and I know that you're talking about this, okay, 3 goes here and the other, but tell me what is the requirement? What someone working on this should do. 7, 8. Okay, thank you for sharing. 8. What do you think about this? two things that I want to comment about this scenario, the last one. Number one, well, my understanding here, and you can help me, is one of your homeworks, but my understanding here is you try to do the following. For instance, you put a number, you put a name to the requirement, and you have this idea of go to the details outside of the name. Separate the details from the label that you use to identify the requirement. That is a good idea. That is exactly what we're going to do. That is exactly what should happen. Use case diagrams, activity diagrams. That is something positive. The issue is, as you mentioned, it's like, well, I am not exactly sure what is gravity rotation. What is the requirement there? Assuming that that is a requirement. Probably that is a step of moving. It is not clear. Change the perspective of the player. I do not fully get the idea of the description or the requirement. Sharing with you in case you want to take a look. Dead zones, label, steps, good distribution, good structure, but not sure the meaning. What are or what is a dead zone in the Pac-Man video game? Animation, we already talked about that. Well, these are 8 scenarios. Feedback from your homework. I do not have a lot of time, so these are 8 scenarios. Each scenario corresponds to one of your teams. So basically, I review 8 teams quickly. I am sharing with you more. I put here letters because these scenarios do not correspond to your class, to your section. These are from other people, not your classmates, but similar idea. A screenshot of the homework, and I put red in things that I would like your help to review. A lot of them. Homework. Review this. Be sure that you can explain why I put these red boxes. All of them, the problem is going to be, they are a requirement, yes or no? Maybe they are a step. Or they are functional, maybe they are non-functional. Or maybe they should not be a requirement at all. Several different examples for you to review. And that is my homework for you. Nothing to submit. I am asking you to review this. Each of you have different backgrounds, different previous experience. Review this. Be sure that you understand why the red boxes. If you need, review the videos from 360, the introduction to requirement and so on. And next lecture, next week, I think we need to do a quiz for sure. And thinking about the content of the quizzes, I think we can review 2 things. Number one, obviously, that you read the syllabus, questions about the syllabus, like how many points for your quizzes, things like that. But the second thing, the most important thing, is that you are able to identify what is and what is not a requirement. What is a functional, what is a non-functional. I can copy paste any of the requirements that I am sharing here, and in a quiz, ask you if it's a requirement or if it's functional or not, true, false, very simple questions. My expectation is you're going to study, you're going to practice, you're going to be able to solve those kind of stuff. Good? Yeah, the next lecture. Okay?
Are we going to get at any point, like, get a list of what, like, a correct list of them would be? Because I feel like we're getting lots of lists of what's wrong, but maybe I missed the one that was correct.
We're going to talk about that next lecture, but
okay.
This is my introduction. This is what could be, and I need to put this here. a draft of what could be correct. And I am going to use this to start talking about which of these need an activity diagram, which of these need more details. That is our next lecture. Yeah. Good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, guys. See you next lecture. Thank you.